The cold metal handcuffs clicked shut around Officer Jordan Carter's wrists as he stood frozen in the station's interrogation room, the air thick with tension. His fellow officers exchanged uneasy glances, their loyalty torn between the badge they wore and the man they knew to be honest to a fault. Across the table, Police Chief Randall Blake leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips. "You thought you could go against me and get away with it?" Blake sneered, his voice dripping with arrogance. What Blake didn't know was that the community Jordan served was about to turn the tables, and justice would soon come knocking. Jordan Carter wasn't the kind of cop you saw in movies. There was no flashy bravado, no need for attention or accolades. At 32 years old, he was a quiet force of integrity in a city that often tested his principles. He believed in the true purpose of his badge, to protect, serve, and stand for justice, even when it wasn't easy. Born and raised in the heart of the community he now patrolled, Jordan understood the struggles of the people he served. His mother, Angela, had been a nurse, tirelessly working long shifts to support Jordan and his younger brother, Malcolm. His father, though absent for much of his childhood, had left behind a legacy of resilience and determination that Jordan carried with him every day. Growing up in a predominantly black neighborhood, Jordan had witnessed firsthand the challenges his community faced: underfunded schools, strained relationships with law enforcement, and a sense of being overlooked by the very systems meant to protect them. Those experiences shaped him, instilling a deep sense of responsibility to be the change he wanted to see. "Remember, son," his mother would often say, "being a good man is about doing what's right, not what's easy." Those words had become his guiding principle, both in life and on the job. After graduating from the police academy, Jordan quickly earned a reputation as a fair and compassionate officer. He didn't see the people in his community as suspects or statistics. He saw them as neighbors, friends, and family. Whether it was breaking up disputes, mentoring at-risk youth, or quietly paying for a struggling family's groceries, Jordan went beyond his duties to make a difference. His approach wasn't always popular among his colleagues, especially with the higher-ups who saw his empathy as a sign of weakness. Chief Randall Blake, in particular, had taken a disliking to Jordan. Blake was everything Jordan despised in law enforcement: cynical, power-hungry, and willing to bend the rules to suit his agenda. Under Blake's leadership, the department had become a symbol of fear rather than safety for much of the city. Complaints about racial profiling and excessive force were common, and while Jordan worked hard to repair trust in the community, Blake seemed intent on undermining those efforts. "You're too soft, Carter," Blake would say during department meetings. "These streets don't need hugs, they need control." Jordan disagreed, but he kept his head down and focused on his work. He wasn't naive. He knew change wouldn't come easily, but he believed that leading by example could inspire others, both inside and outside the department. Outside of work, Jordan found solace in his family and the small joys of life. He was a devoted father to his 6-year-old daughter, Mia, whose laughter was the highlight of his day. His relationship with her mother, Olivia, had ended years ago, but they remained close friends, co-parenting with mutual respect and shared love for their daughter. On his days off, Jordan could often be found at the community center, coaching a youth basketball team. It was his way of giving back, of showing kids that they had a future beyond the challenges they faced. "You can't change the world overnight," he'd tell them, "but you can start by being the best version of yourself every single day." Despite his optimism, Jordan wasn't blind to the risks of his position. Being a black officer in a flawed system came with its own set of challenges. He often felt caught between two worlds, trying to uphold justice while navigating the complexities of a department that didn't always share his values. His mother, now retired, often worried about him. "Jordan, you can't fix everything," she'd say, her voice heavy with concern. "You're only one man." "I know, Ma," he'd reply. But if I don't try, who will? What Jordan didn't know was that his commitment to doing the right thing would soon put him in the crosshairs of someone far more dangerous than the criminals he encountered on the streets. A few weeks before his arrest, Jordan had uncovered troubling information during a routine case, a cover-up involving Chief Blake and several other officers. The evidence suggested misuse of funds, false reports, and even tampering with evidence in critical cases. Jordan knew reporting it would be risky, but he couldn't look the other way. It's not just about me, he thought. It's about the people who trust me to stand up for them. His decision to blow the whistle set off a chain of events he couldn't have predicted. Blake, determined to protect his own reputation, began orchestrating a plan to frame Jordan and discredit him entirely. What Blake didn't anticipate was the strength of the community Jordan had spent years building trust with, and the resilience of a man who had never backed down from a fight for justice. It started with small, seemingly random shifts in behavior. Colleagues who used to greet Jordan warmly now avoided eye contact in the hallways. Conversations that once flowed easily became stilted, filled with awkward pauses and vague responses. Jordan couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, but he chalked it up to the pressure of the job and tried to focus on his work. Then, the rumors began to swirl. Whispers of misconduct, tampered evidence, and abuse of power started making their way through the department. At first, Jordan dismissed them as just another day in a toxic workplace, but when his name was attached to the accusations, the air shifted entirely. One morning, Jordan arrived at the station to find an internal affairs officer waiting by his desk. His heart sank as she handed him an official notice. "Officer Carter," she said formally, "you're being placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into allegations of misconduct." Jordan's stomach churned. "Misconduct? What are you talking about?" The officer's expression was impassive. "You're accused of falsifying reports and tampering with evidence in multiple cases. You'll need to turn in your badge and weapon while the investigation is ongoing." The room seemed to tilt as her words sank in. Jordan handed over his badge and sidearm, his mind racing. He knew these accusations weren't true, but the weight of them felt crushing. His colleagues watched in silence, their expressions a mix of pity and discomfort. No one spoke up. The news spread quickly through the department and the community. For someone like Jordan, who had built a reputation for fairness and integrity, the allegations were a devastating blow. Friends and neighbors who once greeted him with respect now regarded him with suspicion. At home, the impact was even more personal. Jordan's daughter, Mia, overheard a news report on the investigation and asked him, "Daddy, are you in trouble?" Jordan crouched down to her level, his heart aching. "No, baby," he said softly. "I didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes people say things about others that aren't true." Mia's innocent eyes searched his face for reassurance. But why would they do that? He didn't have an easy answer for her. Instead, he hugged her tightly, vowing to clear his name for her sake. The person behind the accusations, Police Chief Randall Blake, had orchestrated the entire scheme with precision. After Jordan uncovered evidence of corruption, Blake knew he had to act quickly to protect himself. Framing Jordan was the perfect solution. Blake leveraged his position to plant fake evidence, doctored files, suspicious bank transactions, and witness statements that painted Jordan as a rogue officer willing to bend the law for personal gain. Blake's influence ensured that the department's leadership would support the investigation without question. For Jordan, the fallout was swift and far-reaching. His bank accounts were frozen pending further review, his personal and professional reputation lay in tatters, and his once loyal colleagues now kept their distance. But the worst part wasn't the professional consequences, it was the betrayal. Jordan had dedicated his life to protecting and serving his community, only to be betrayed by the very system he had worked so hard to uphold. His mother, Angela, was one of his strongest supporters during the ordeal. "You've always been a fighter, Jordan," she said one evening as they sat in her living room. "This is no different. You'll get through this." Her faith in him gave Jordan the strength to keep going, but the weight of the accusations took its toll. He often found himself awake in the middle of the night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how he could prove his innocence against such powerful opposition. The community's response was mixed. Some people, particularly those who knew Jordan personally, rallied around him, organizing protests and speaking out on his behalf. Others, influenced by the negative press, assumed the worst. "I always thought Carter was too good to be true," one man said during a heated conversation at a local diner. "Turns out he's just like the rest of them." Hearing such comments stung, but Jordan refused to let them define him. He focused instead on the people who believed in him. Olivia, Mia's mother, was among them. She had always admired Jordan's integrity and knew he wouldn't compromise his principles. "Whatever they're saying, it's not true," she told him firmly. "We'll prove it." Jordan also found unexpected allies within the department. A young officer named Devon, who had long looked up to Jordan, quietly reached out with information. "I don't know how much this will help," he said, slipping Jordan a folder, "but I've been keeping track of some questionable decisions Chief Blake has made. You're not the only one he's tried to bury." The folder contained damning evidence, records of unaccounted funds, manipulated case files, and correspondence that hinted at deeper corruption within the department. It wasn't enough to exonerate Jordan outright, but it was a start. As the days turned into weeks, Jordan worked tirelessly to build his case. He met with community leaders, journalists, and legal advocates, determined to expose the truth. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. Blake, however, wasn't done. Sensing that Jordan was closing in, he ramped up his efforts to discredit him. Anonymous leaks to the media painted Jordan as a bitter officer seeking revenge, further muddying the waters. But what Blake underestimated was the strength of the community Jordan had spent years building. People who once hesitated to speak out now came forward, sharing stories of how Jordan had helped them or stood up for them. The tension reached a breaking point when Jordan decided to take his evidence public, risking everything to expose the corruption at the heart of the department. It was a bold move, one that would set the stage for a confrontation that would change everything, for him, for Blake, and for the community they both claimed to serve. Jordan sat at his dining table late into the night, papers scattered before him, the dim light casting shadows across his tired face. The folder Officer Devon had slipped him was a lifeline, a glimpse into the depths of Chief Blake's corruption. But it wasn't enough to clear his name. Jordan needed more. He reached out to his lawyer, Denise Harper, a no-nonsense attorney with a reputation for taking on high-stakes cases. Denise had worked with Jordan before, helping the department implement community-based initiatives. She believed in his integrity and didn't hesitate to take his case. "Jordan, this isn't just a defense. This is a war," Denise said firmly during their first meeting. "Blake isn't going to back down easily. We need to build a case that's airtight and impossible to ignore." Jordan nodded. "I'll do whatever it takes. I just want the truth to come out." The first step was identifying witnesses who could testify to Blake's misconduct. Jordan started with the community he had served for years. He visited families he had helped, local business owners, and even former colleagues who had left the force due to Blake's toxic leadership. At first, many were hesitant to speak out. The fear of retaliation was palpable, and some worried about the risks of going against someone as powerful as Blake. But Jordan's sincerity won them over. "Officer Carter, you've always treated us with respect," said Mrs. Jenkins, a shop owner whose son Jordan had mentored. "If you need my help, you've got it." Small victories like these fueled Jordan's determination. The community began to rally around him, organizing protests and starting an online petition demanding an independent investigation into the department. Social media posts flooded in, recounting stories of Jordan's fairness and dedication. The hashtag #Justice for Carter began trending, putting pressure on the department to address the growing unrest. However, Blake wasn't idle. He doubled down on his smear campaign, using his connections in the media to plant stories questioning Jordan's character. Headlines like "Officer Accused of Corruption, The Truth Behind the Badge" painted Jordan as a disgruntled employee trying to deflect blame. Denise called Jordan one morning, her voice tense. "We've got a problem. Blake's team just released a new batch of evidence. Bank transactions and emails they're claiming are yours." Jordan felt his stomach drop. "They're fake," he said, his voice trembling with frustration. "I know," Denise replied, "but proving that takes time. And right now, public opinion is swinging back in their favor." Jordan slammed his fist on the table, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. "How do you fight someone who controls everything?" "You fight smarter," Denise said. "Blake's arrogance is his weakness. People like him always slip up. We just need to find it." As they worked to counter Blake's moves, an unexpected ally emerged, Officer Devon. Despite the risks, he continued digging into department records, uncovering a series of unauthorized payouts from a slush fund Blake had created. The evidence pointed to a cover-up involving high-profile cases, including one where critical evidence had mysteriously gone missing. "Jordan, this is big," Devon said during a late-night meeting in a secluded diner. "If we can tie this to Blake, it'll blow the whole thing wide open." But the risks for Devon were mounting. One day, he found a threatening note taped to his locker. "Stop digging, or else." Shaken but undeterred, Devon shared the note with Denise, who documented it as part of the growing case. Meanwhile, Jordan continued to struggle with the personal toll of the situation. Mia, his 6-year-old daughter, started asking why her classmates' parents were saying mean things about him. "Daddy, is it true you're in trouble?" she asked one evening, her wide eyes filled with worry. Jordan crouched down, taking her hands in his. "No, sweetheart. Some people are saying things that aren't true because they don't want to get caught doing bad things, but I promise you, I'm going to make it right." Her innocent belief in him gave Jordan the strength to push forward. The turning point came when Denise arranged for a press conference. Standing before a small crowd of reporters, Jordan addressed the allegations directly. "I have dedicated my life to serving this community with honor and integrity," he began, his voice steady despite the cameras flashing in his face. "The accusations against me are not only false, but a deliberate attempt to silence me for uncovering corruption within this department. I will not be silenced, and I will not stop fighting for the truth." The press conference shifted the narrative. Community members who had been hesitant to speak out now felt emboldened. More people came forward with stories of Blake's misconduct, adding fuel to the growing fire. One night, as Jordan was reviewing files with Denise, Devon burst into the office, his face pale but determined. "I found it," he said, holding up a USB drive. "What is it?" Denise asked. "Audio recordings," Devon replied. "Conversations between Blake and his inner circle discussing how to frame you and cover their tracks. This is the proof we need." The recordings were damning. In one, Blake could be heard instructing an officer to plant evidence in Jordan's files. In another, he openly admitted to falsifying reports to protect his allies. As Denise listened, her face broke into a triumphant smile. "This changes everything," she said. The community's support reached a fever pitch as the recordings were leaked to the press. The outcry was immediate and overwhelming, with calls for Blake's resignation and a full-scale investigation into the department. For the first time in weeks, Jordan felt a glimmer of hope. The battle wasn't over, but the tide was finally turning. And as the community rallied around him, he realized he wasn't fighting alone. The stage was set for the confrontation that would determine not only his future but the future of the department, and the fight for justice was far from over. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, community leaders, and members of the public filled every seat, their eyes fixed on the front where the hearing was about to begin. At the center of it all was Jordan Carter, sitting beside his lawyer, Denise Harper. His face was calm, but his clenched hands betrayed the storm of emotions within him. This was the moment everything hinged on, the chance to finally expose Chief Randall Blake for the corrupt leader he was. Across the room, Blake sat with his legal team, exuding an air of smug confidence. He had spent years manipulating the system, and it seemed inconceivable to him that his actions could ever catch up with him. But as the proceedings began, that confidence began to waver. Denise opened with a sharp and deliberate statement. "Your Honor, this case is not just about the false allegations against Officer Jordan Carter. It's about a pattern of corruption, abuse of power, and deliberate attempts to silence those who dare to seek justice. Today, we will prove that Chief Randall Blake is not only responsible for framing Officer Carter, but has systematically undermined the very institution he claims to lead." The prosecution smirked, ready to counter her arguments, but they weren't prepared for what came next. Denise called her first witness, Officer Devon. Devon stepped up to the stand, his hands trembling slightly as he swore to tell the truth. "I worked closely under Chief Blake for several years," he began, his voice steadying as he spoke. "During that time, I witnessed numerous acts of misconduct, but I was too afraid to speak out. Until now." Devon described the threats he had received and the unethical orders Blake had given, his words painting a damning picture. The courtroom was silent, every word landing like a blow against Blake's defense. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for, the recordings. Denise handed a USB drive to the court clerk, who played the first recording over the courtroom speakers. Blake's voice filled the room, unmistakable in its arrogance. "Carter's a problem," the recording began. "If we don't shut him down, he'll drag us all under. Plant the evidence. Make it airtight." Gasps echoed through the room. Jordan closed his eyes briefly, the weight of vindication washing over him. For weeks, he had carried the burden of these accusations, and now the truth was finally out. The second recording was even more incriminating. Blake could be heard discussing payouts and falsified reports, his tone casual as if he believed himself untouchable. Blake's legal team scrambled, but the damage was done. The evidence was irrefutable. When it was Blake's turn to testify, his confidence had crumbled. His answers were evasive, his tone defensive, and his attempts to discredit the recordings only made him appear more guilty. The jury and the crowd saw through his facade, their expressions hardening with every word. Then Jordan took the stand. He spoke about his love for his community, the sacrifices he had made to serve it, and the betrayal he felt when he realized Blake had targeted him. "I became a police officer to make a difference," Jordan said, his voice firm but emotional. "I've spent my entire career building trust and serving with integrity. Chief Blake tried to take that away from me. Not because I did anything wrong, but because I stood in the way of his corruption. Today, I'm here to reclaim my name and ensure that no one else has to endure what I did." The courtroom erupted into applause, despite the judge's attempts to restore order. Jordan's words resonated deeply, not just with those present, but with everyone who had followed his story. When the verdict was announced, it was clear. Blake was found guilty of multiple counts of corruption, tampering with evidence, and abuse of power. His sentence included prison time, fines, and the permanent loss of his position. For Jordan, the moment was bittersweet. The fight had taken its toll, but standing in the courtroom surrounded by supporters, he felt a profound sense of relief. As he stepped outside, the cheers of the crowd greeted him. Community members held signs that read, "Justice for Carter" and "Accountability Matters." One by one, people approached him, thanking him for his bravery. A young boy tugged at his sleeve and said, "You're a hero." Jordan knelt down, smiling. "No, buddy. I just did what was right. But thank you." In the weeks that followed, the department underwent sweeping changes. An independent oversight committee was established, and new leadership prioritized transparency and community engagement. Jordan was reinstated and offered a promotion, but he turned it down, choosing instead to focus on rebuilding trust in his neighborhood. The experience changed him forever. It had tested his limits, broken him down, and built him back up stronger. Standing in front of a class of young recruits one day, Jordan shared his story. Being an officer isn't about power, it's about responsibility, he told them. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. Remember that, and you'll do just fine. For the first time in months, Jordan felt at peace. The fight wasn't over, but for now, he could rest knowing that justice had prevailed. The courtroom victory marked the end of one chapter for Jordan Carter and the beginning of another. For the first time in months, he could walk into the precinct without feeling the weight of false accusations hanging over him. The smiles and handshakes from his fellow officers were different now, not tinged with pity or doubt, but with respect. Chief Randall Blake's downfall sent shockwaves through the department and beyond. It became a national story, a symbol of how even those in power could be held accountable when the truth was brought to light. But for Jordan, it wasn't about the headlines or the public recognition. It was about restoring faith in the community and within himself. Back in his neighborhood, the outpouring of support continued. Families he had served for years came forward with kind words and gestures of gratitude. At the local community center, where Jordan often volunteered, a group of teenagers surprised him with a mural they had painted. It featured a depiction of him standing tall, his badge shining, surrounded by words like justice, integrity, and hope. "You've always been there for us, Officer Carter," said one of the teens, a boy Jordan had mentored. "This is our way of saying thank you." Jordan smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "You didn't have to do this," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But we wanted to," the boy replied, "because you didn't just fight for yourself. You fought for all of us." The changes within the police department were slow but meaningful. Under new leadership, initiatives were launched to improve transparency and rebuild trust with the community. Officers underwent bias training, and an independent oversight board was established to ensure accountability. Jordan played a key role in these efforts, drawing from his own experiences to advocate for policies that would prevent future abuses of power. Though the work was challenging, Jordan found solace in knowing he was making a difference. He often reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point, the betrayal, the struggle, and the ultimate vindication. It had been a painful process, but it had also strengthened his resolve and deepened his connection to the community he served. At home, Jordan cherished the quiet moments with his daughter, Mia. She had been his anchor throughout the ordeal, her innocent belief in him giving him the strength to keep fighting. One evening, as they sat on the couch reading her favorite book, Mia looked up at him and asked, "Daddy, are the bad people gone now?" Jordan paused, considering his answer. "Some of them are," he said carefully. "But there's always more work to do. That's why we have to be kind, strong, and brave, so we can make the world a better place, little by little." Mia nodded, her small hand slipping into his. "I think you're really brave, Daddy," she said with a shy smile. Her words stayed with him, a reminder of why he had fought so hard. The legacy of Jordan's battle wasn't just the reforms within the department or the community's renewed faith in justice. It was the ripple effect of his actions, the inspiration he had given to others to stand up, speak out, and believe in the power of truth. One day, while visiting the police academy to speak to a new class of recruits, Jordan shared a simple but powerful message. "Your badge doesn't make you a hero. Your actions do. Always remember that this job isn't about power. It's about service. It's about standing for what's right, even when it's hard." The room erupted in applause, but Jordan's thoughts were elsewhere. He thought about the people who had stood by him, the sacrifices he had made, and the strength it had taken to rise above the challenges. Walking out of the academy that day, Jordan felt a sense of peace and purpose. The fight wasn't over, but he was ready for whatever came next. And as he looked out at the city he loved, he knew one thing for certain. He had made a difference, not just for himself, but for everyone who believed in the power of justice. Jordan's story is a testament to the power of resilience, integrity, and community. It reminds us that standing up for what's right isn't always easy, but it's necessary to create meaningful change. Corruption thrives in silence, and the courage to speak out, no matter how daunting, can inspire a ripple effect that reaches far beyond one individual. Now it's your turn. How can you make a difference in your own community? Whether it's by holding leaders accountable, supporting those who speak out, or simply educating yourself and others about issues of justice and equality, your actions matter. Share this story to remind others of the importance of standing up for truth. Start conversations about the challenges faced by those who fight for justice and the reforms needed to build a fairer system. Every small act contributes to a larger movement. Together, we can create a world where integrity is valued, accountability is enforced, and every voice is heard. Be the change. Speak up. Support those who fight for justice. Because when we stand together, we're unstoppable.